Welcome everyone to a special edition webinar. This is based on, first of all, Angela Spearman is our guest today on this particular one. She hosts the Sunday night Betrayed Partner drop-in group and has been doing that. What did we decide? Almost 5 years now?
Almost 6 years in February.
Almost 6 years. Okay, there, lost track of time. She is the facilitator for the Betrayed Partner work groups that we have on our website. She has one starting, if you're here in live time, there's another one starting tomorrow, a new series. Those are low cost but high impact, navigating this space as a betrayed partner. So would invite you to check that out. I'll put a link in the chat. But she experienced Helene in a real way recently, and she brought the idea of having a webinar to talk about the impact of that and trauma and everything else. And I thought there's so many parallels to this. So I'm going to mute and I'm going to let her present. Those of you joining live, please type your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. But I'm so grateful that she had no power for like a week, right? Yeah. Crazy. So
it was so crazy.
So then I get a message. She found enough fuel to drive to another town to send an email to the people who are in her work groups to let them know that there was going to be a delay. And I'm thinking, just text me if you had any, and I would have sent that email. But like, this is the level of dedication. Like, you don't know how dedicated she is to this work. I do. And I'm just incredibly grateful and honored to be here with you. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to let you share. I know you've got some things, but again, those of you joining us live, please type in any questions that you have for Angela.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Tammy, for having me here. As I was explaining before we got started, this experience for me has left such an impact that I need a chance to talk about this so that I can get back to normal, so that I can get back to the work that I was doing. There are so many parallels, but what I want to really start out by saying, because my heart is so tender to all of the suffering that is still happening around me right now. My boys went back to school for the first time today since it happened. It's been well over 10 days now, I think. And there are still people without power. There are still people struggling to be found. So the impact is really significant. And so when I come in here and I'm talking about the impact and the devastation of something like a major hurricane, a natural disaster, the devastation and the tragedy, we cannot compare apples to apples. I do not in any way want to minimize either a betrayed partner's suffering or the suffering of somebody who's going through what they're going through in the aftermath of this Hurricane Helene that came through here. And so I first just want to say that. So please understand, I'm going to be using metaphors from things that we've experienced over the last 10 to 12 days. Also, there is a lot of political things that can come up. A lot of people feel very strongly. This is election year. We're a month out from elections. And so any conversations that we have, nothing is meant to be political. We won't be entertaining any questions that could take it in a political direction. We are really here just to talk about healing after a tragedy and the things that we can learn from people who have been through this natural disaster, and how we might apply that to our healing as betrayed partners. So with that, and if you have any questions, please let me know, because my heart is very much with both betrayed partners and people going through this suffering. With that, I have a meditation that I have been doing, and so I'm going to share that with you. It's something that I have been doing for the last week, and we can just kind of start out with that. So take a deep breath. May we step lightly. May we honor ourselves as we honor others. May we be gentle with our experiences. And may we approach with curiosity, holding space for our own pain and longing. So, thank you all very much for being here. I want to talk about starting with some of the impacts. I want to describe some of the impacts that I'm seeing. Let's talk about some of the relational impacts. We'll start there. Whenever there is a tragedy, people are going to respond differently. And this is really important for us to understand as betrayed partners. We often wonder, why is this so hard for me? What's wrong with me that I'm having such a hard time with this? Then there are others who say, I never signed up for this. I'm out. I'm moving on, right? Maybe some anger, things like that. And then there are some others who say, well, I know that this is a part of life, and this is one of many crises that I'm going to experience in my life, and I'm just going to keep going on, right? There are going to be people who take up some sort of a cause, and they use the energy of the pain to promote some sort of a cause that is important to them. Some people, like me, what I desperately wanted to do in response was to put on work boots and get out there and help find people. I wanted to carry on my back in a backpack medicine and food and bring it to people who could not get out on their own. We're still finding people. In the news today was an 85-year-old woman when somebody on a horseback found her and brought food to her home. It was very difficult even for the horse to cross this rocky path because the road was gone and there's now water where the road was. She started crying and said, I haven't seen anyone in 8 days. You're the first person I've seen in 8 days. No electricity. I don't know about food and medicine. I didn't know how long this was going to go on. Is everywhere like this? How do what's even happening? She was so completely cut off and just sobbing as this man on a mule was just carrying basic things, including books, right? Like a book that she could sit down and read on her front porch while she's going through something like this. So everybody is going to respond differently to their own disasters and to the disasters around them. So for my family, we lost power, we lost internet, right? We were inconvenienced. We couldn't use cell phones. We had very, very limited access to communications. When we tried to leave our neighborhood, we couldn't get more than a quarter of a mile because there were so many live power lines down and trees down. We couldn't get anywhere for days. So when you are going through a tragedy that is so widespread, or your own personal tragedy, it's so important to remember that you and the people around you are going to respond to it very differently. And to hold space for that, to look for ways that you can honor and pay attention to, what is it that I'm wanting to do in response to this? How am I wanting to act on this pain? What is it that I need? Do I need to sit down and cuddle with loved ones? Do I need to find a good book and curl up on a couch, right? What is it that we need? And that's going to be unique and individual for each person. So that's one of the most important things that I really wanted to lay out there, because we often think, why am I responding this way? Or why is that person responding that way? Including, especially in the case of like a betrayal trauma, there's a lot of stigma around what we're going through, and it's isolating and people cannot understand it. And when we reach out for help and we reach out for support and they don't know what to think, a lot of the clients that I work with, when I have a betrayed partner sitting on my sofa here in my office, and she says, I told a loved one about what was going on, and they didn't respond the way that I thought that they did. I want everyone to understand that when there is a betrayal, you're not the only one being betrayed. They don't know what to think. They don't know how to respond. It's a shock for them. They didn't know that the person that you're in an intimate partnership with had the capacity to do the things that they were doing. It's a shock to them, and they don't know what to do with it. Do they just keep going on like nothing happened? Do they wonder what it was that you did to contribute to it? What do they stop communication, or do they come over and try to reconcile the two of you? I mean, it's a shock to everybody. And so please be patient with the people around you and have very realistic expectations that even the most loving people who want to be supportive and who want to care don't always know how to do that in a good way, right? They may respond by saying, well, you need to be doing this, and why would you stay in that situation? And again, most often it's coming from a place where they really care about you. They see you hurting, they see you in pain, and they just want it to stop. So maybe they're throwing resources at you. Maybe they're throwing their advice at you, when really all that you need is a space to figure out what just happened, right? And to make decisions for yourself. The next, in regard to relational impact, is loss. There is a significant amount of loss that I'm seeing around me, including a loss of normalcy, a loss of belongings, a loss of relationships with people who either those people are having to move away or you're having to move away because there's nothing left there. The losses continue to mount, where as the day goes on, you realize more of the losses that you've sustained that you didn't even realize at the beginning, right? You keep finding more losses. And then there's survivor's guilt, right? So like those of us who were minorly impacted, which I consider myself to be minorly impacted, wonder what can I do? How do I fix this? Could we have kept this from happening somehow? There's all of these questions that we're looking for ways to make things better. And it creates inside of us these big questions that may or may not serve us well, right? So those are some of the relational impacts that I wanted to touch on. There's a lot, guys, like my brain's just firing, but I'm going to stick to my outline. Tammy, did you want to say anything about any of those before I go on to some of the obstacles that I and others around me are encountering and have encountered?
I added memories because I thought, like you talked about belongings, and sometimes belongings have memories attached. But from a betrayal trauma standpoint, it's like we had this great vacation in Hawaii, making this up, and now that memory is there's grief and loss about the memory because that memory is tainted by betrayal. So from your standpoint, yeah, if a favorite belonging from grandma got destroyed in the storm, now I don't have that for that memory, but I think there's a parallel with from that standpoint too.
We're cut off from many of the things that created comfort and belonging for us. Absolutely. Even some sense of identity. Many of these people, particularly in the small mountain towns, those towns are gone, and they've always lived there. Their parents live there, their grandparents live there. What if they can't live there in any way to sustain themselves? Where does that leave them? Where do we go from here? And if all of those pictures and mementos, things that were so grounding and connecting us to our heritage, if that's gone. And the parallel for that with betrayal trauma is, this isn't what marriage is supposed to look like. This isn't what a partnership is supposed to look like. If this is what happened in my partnership, what does that say about me? My parents stayed together, right? So why couldn't I stay together? Things like that. These identities. There is a loss of identity or a disorientation of identity that is incredibly destabilizing, I think would be a good word for it, and leaves us looking around going, where's solid ground? Where can I find solid ground to stand on? I think that's an excellent point, Tammy. Good. Okay. So obstacles, sharing some of the things that my family ran into and families in these mountain towns are still continuing to run into. First, failure of communications, being cut off, metaphorically and literally, from people who we love and who care about us, trying to establish communication and having dropped calls, having to be very intentional and go out of our way and invest resources and energy just to get to a place where we can communicate, right? Whether that's with loved ones, whether it's with our partner, whether it's with teachers of our children, right? And trying to figure, I mean, like, all communication is disrupted. And it takes so much intentionality and so much commitment and perseverance just to make any type of communication. And sometimes even when you try, it's not available to you, right? You can do everything within your control and still not have access to communicating with this person that you wanted to communicate with, right? So failure of communications, which leads to further isolation, further despair, not knowing what's real and what's not real. How far reaching is this? Is my little town the only town that's being impacted like this? There was a doctor in the ER in Asheville, North Carolina, and he said, he called up a family member and said, is this like an apocalypse? Is this everywhere? Because we didn't expect this. We didn't know what was happening. And so when he was flooded in the hospital and they were losing electricity, they couldn't wash their hands to do the surgeries. They couldn't clean people who needed to be cleaned because there was no water. You're looking around and you're wondering, how far reaching is this? Am I the only one going through this, right? How long is this going to last? So the failure of communications, the difficulties there are some of the most disruptive. Next, I wrote loss of utilities. So when I think of the loss of utilities, there's obviously electricity, access to gasoline, internet access, which again cuts you off from communication or understanding, getting a picture of what's happening out there. When I think of loss of utilities in terms of betrayal trauma, I think of the loss of energy. We are so worn down. We are so impacted. And the things that would normally be able to power us are not sufficient to power us through this. Not because we lose interest in it, not because we don't want those things to help refresh and empower us, but because this is so devastating that we're going to have to be very intentional at incorporating alternative energy sources, right? We have to seek those out. We have to establish those for ourselves. There was, unfortunately, and not a lot, but unfortunately, we did see some theft. This part of the country where I live, people, for the most part, were helping protect each other's businesses, were helping. But I think that there was enough despair that people in a panic behaved in very chaotic ways. And so, for example, restaurants and grocery stores, their power generators were stolen, right? Which we need grocery stores to have power, So when that happens, it affects the entire community. Those restaurants, they were providing Wi-Fi because they had a Starlink, and now they can't, right? So the impact is significant. But when we think in terms of betrayal, we may look around us and as we're going through this, and the situation is made worse by that sense of despair and panic. Sometimes a lack of information, ignorance. If you think that this is going to last forever, you're going to behave in very different ways than if you have a sense of, okay, within a week, electricity will be back, kids will be back in school, we'll be okay, right? If you have that sense, you're going to engage all of this very, very differently. But when you're going through something like betrayal, you don't know that you aren't going to feel this way forever. You don't know that healing does happen. Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of unknowns here. There's another hurricane. We could get hit by another hurricane any day. We are still within range of possible future tragedy. There's a lot of unknowns, a lot of similarities there, right? We have no guarantees that the partner who struggles with their compulsive behavior, we don't know. No guarantees, right? More on the chaotic and panic response. At most of the intersections, I mean, at first, all of the intersections, once you could get on the roads, those lights were still out. Today was the first day that all of the lights were on when I took my son to school. There were hit and runs, including my own vehicle. When I went out, there was somebody in my neighborhood who is on oxygen, and they were afraid they weren't going to have enough gasoline to run their generator to use their oxygen machine. And so I went and got a 5-gallon container, and I said, I don't know how long it's going to take me, but I'm going to drive until I find gas. And everywhere I went, if there was a gas station open, the lines were 2 hours long, at least, waiting to get gas. And even then, you didn't know if it was going to run out of gas by the time it was your turn. And so people were, I kid you not, using Walmart plastic bags to put fuel in. That is how much of a panic response we were seeing. And that does not work, right? So this panic, the fear, led to making situations so much worse. So there were hit and runs. When I went out to get gas, somebody hit my truck. Minor damage, thankfully, because there was certainly no police you could call at this time. We're literally, their responders are helping people in much dire situations than hit and run situations. So lines at stores, because so many people were without power and so many people were trapped in their homes, grocery stores only had 2 or 3 employees. So when you could find a grocery store that had a generator, they would only let 10 customers into the store at a time to get what little food was left at that point, because they have already had to throw out so much food. So this sense of urgency is one of the things that I try to soothe and calm with all of my betrayed partners who are coming and working with me. When we feel a sense of urgency, then we make more demands. We aren't feeling like we can just stop and let the dust settle and make more informed decisions. We keep ourselves in a spin, but there's a reason why we're doing that, because we don't know how long we're going to be in this situation. And we get out and we're trying to get our needs met, and it's a lot harder than we thought it was going to be, right? So this idea of reducing some of the sense of urgency, connecting with others. I'm going to talk after I go through all of this. I'm going to share some of the takeaways, right? Some of the things that we can be doing from ourselves, for ourselves, that are just some takeaways from all of this. Okay, so I'll get into that in just a little bit. Another impact was the inability to move about safely. All of the parks that I would go to if I were taking my kids out, they were all closed because there was still live power lines down, still flooding. Some of them opened up today, which I'm very excited and thankful for. But the things that I would normally do to get out and help myself feel better weren't safe yet. And that may be true in the context of betrayal, where you want to go and be in your usual book club. You want to go and hang out at a typical gathering place, but you know that the pain is so significant. You're being so impacted. You can't imagine entering into that space and being around people who it's not safe to tell them what you're going through. So you just don't go. And now you are trapped, right? You are stuck inside whatever that inside looks like for you. So we lose access to many of the things that we need to help us navigate this. Misinformation, I want to talk a little bit about that. There is, anytime there is something big going on, it gets national attention, people begin to speculate. Cortisol, adrenaline, we see things in the news, we see pictures, we start piecing things together in our mind. And that creates stories that just aren't true. And those stories are unfortunately causing much more harm, and it's keeping people from the help that they need. It's keeping people from resources that they need to get. An example of how I see this in betrayal trauma is something that we call like a generalized mistrust. And I see this a lot when I'm running these part 1 and part 2 groups. Betrayed partners come in, male or female, does not matter. They come in, I'm sharing something that we have learned as CSATs. We're describing the addiction process. We're describing how not all addicts woke up in that morning and said to themselves, I can't wait to see how I can hurt my partner today, right? And there's so much pain that it's very difficult to hear that information. And so I get, one of the ways that I like to run my groups is that it is very participatory. We don't record them because I value and I make space. I want you to ask your questions. If you're feeling cynical about something that I'm telling you, bring it. Let's talk about it, because I want to make sure you're understanding why I'm saying what I'm saying, why what I'm presenting to you matters, and how it will help you to know these things. But when you're going through betrayal, you don't know what's real and what's not real. You don't know who to trust, myself included. You could be paying to come to me as a CSAT and sit on my sofa, and I could say, here's the map. This is what it takes to heal. And because of your pain, you just don't know, should I trust Angela? Should I trust my CSAT? Should I trust this group? Should I trust what's being presented in these books or in these podcasts? It's a globalized mystery. We don't know what to trust, what is safe to believe. And when we're doing that, or when we're telling others, like every once in a while, I'll see something like on We Tonglen where somebody says, oh, don't go to this group, they don't let you do this or whatever. And what breaks my heart about it is that maybe that group is what somebody in We Tonglen needed to go to. So just because it wasn't the right fit for you doesn't mean it's not the right fit for somebody else. So please, please, please don't send people away from resources. Just share your experience, what it is that was helpful for you. These things were helpful about it. These things were unhelpful about it. And that was my experience. And I've seen and heard a lot of people have had wonderful experiences, right? But be aware when you are experiencing that globalized mistrust. Another example of the globalized mistrust that I talk about when running the groups is, you know, on a beautiful day and you're walking at a park and maybe you see an elderly couple and they're walking and they're holding hands. Before the betrayal, you might see that and think, that is so sweet. Look at how they have been together for so long. I bet they've got all these amazing stories. But then after betrayal, you see that, and the first thought you have is, I bet one of them is cheating on the other person, right? You're cutting yourself off from this wonderful moment of awe and enjoying that these two people are out here walking and they're holding their hands. We start assigning meaning that isn't necessarily true, right? So please be aware of that as a betrayed partner. We struggle with trust because our reality is not what we thought it was. And we're left picking up the pieces and trying to figure out what's real and what's not. So it's natural, it's normal that you're going through that, but please be aware of it. Okay. Uh, oh, okay. This is a big analogy here. One of the things that I was explaining about the storm, the reason why it was particularly impactful is because for the week leading up to Hurricane Helene coming up through our area, we had been having steady rains. And because of those rains, the ground was already overly saturated. So when this storm came through, there was no solid ground for the roots of the trees to hold on to, which led to mudslides, landslides. It led to, in my area, massive losses of trees and bringing down power lines. The analogy there for betrayed partners is that nobody makes it to adulthood without painful experiences. And those painful experiences leave us with messages that can make it harder for us to face a massive tragedy. And nobody makes it through life without crises and tragedy and loss. So when we have unexplored early life experiences that left us with weak soil, or maybe you've done all that work with a trauma therapist. Maybe, like many betrayed partners that I work with, they find out that their partner has done these things while they're caring for an elderly parent. And at the same time, trying to help a young adult child start their first family or graduate high school or college, right? Your life is already so saturated that when this event happens, there is very little ground left to help hold everything together. So huge metaphors here in that regard. Please be aware if you are particularly devastated by this. It's likely that you also had a whole lot of other things going on. You know, I see betrayed partners who were already in a battle with cancer when they found out, right? That is some loose soil right there. Okay. Varying degrees of personal ability. So every once in a while, I would hear, you know, when you ask somebody, how are you coping with this? Or are you still without power, et cetera? You know, once we could start texting with each other. And there would be some people who would say, I haven't slept in days because it's so hot and we don't have electricity and I can't run a fan. And we lost all the food in our freezer, you know, all this. But then there were also people who said, you know, after 24 hours of being without power, I just locked the house up and I went to the beach house and I'm going to come back when the power comes back on. That's going to be very similar when we're talking about people who are experiencing betrayal. Some people have more resources and can remove themselves from situations. They can provide for themselves more resources, right? So there are varying degrees of people going through tragedies and what they have available to them to help them heal and respond and react to these things. And then the final obstacle that I wanted to make sure that I touched on. A lot of people are asking each other and asking themselves, is it safe to rebuild? Is it safe yet to rebuild? If I rebuild, do I want to rebuild here or somewhere else? And the question that I have in response to that, like the deep knowing, loving answer that comes up for me to that question is another question. And that is it safe to not rebuild? Please consider the costs of not rebuilding. Okay. All right. Tammy, any thoughts or questions on that?
I do. I was thinking, when you were talking about the chaos, including, the self-serving, like I'm going to go take the generator because I am more important than, the whole community. And I thought, and you used an example for betrayal, and I'm going like, oh, that sounds like addict thinking of like, we seek out exactly what well, we deserve it, we're more important, we're going to take care of ourselves regardless of what our family members and everyone else are needing, not even just wanting, needing. And so like that was my first thought on that one, was like, oh, addict thinking of like, I'm more important than everyone else, and I'm not making it, it's not right, it's not okay, like none of those things, it just is, until we get into recovery and we can go, oh, there's other people and we want to be in healthy connection and relationships and all of those things. So when you were talking about the feeling trapped, I was like, I wrote trapped in big large letters and COVID, because that's how I felt in COVID, when in a very different way. Yes, I could still go outside, but it was like when everything was shut down and everything, like it was so contained, all of the things that I did that would be helpful for me, with the exception of going for a run, were taken away. So like, I couldn't go to my 12-step meetings. I couldn't go to places where, like, not surprisingly, I'm a people person. I actually want to be connected with people. So like when all of that's being shut down, and then I was thinking too, from, if you're a couple who's struggling, you're on the cusp of all of this, and, and then you're trapped with the person who has betrayed you, and how, painful that is. And you're right there. When you're talking about, some people have more resources, and it isn't just the beach house and things, but it's also, I have more resources because I have more connections, I have more stable relationships, versus, like there's lots of couples, and I know you have this too, where for lots of reasons, and this is going to be a simplified version, but I hear often where addicts have cut off, betrayed partners from family and friends. No, it's just us and all that. And there's that, and it's, in my opinion, manipulative and, and isolating. And now the partner is like, I am stuck in a house for 10 days with no power. It's not safe to go outside, and it doesn't feel safe in my house. And, how difficult that has to, to be, along with everything else. We also had a season recently, with lots of external things going on. And I was like, I'm overwhelmed. I am overwhelmed in this moment. And to do some grounding and to understand that this is how I feel right now. But then I also have the ability, like this goes back to that, I have resources, I have tools to use to be able to go, okay, my reality right now is I am safe. I'm okay. I'm sitting in a chair. My feet are on the ground and I'm breathing, all of those things. And what is the next one thing, not the whole laundry list? What is the next one thing that I can do that will help me feel like, I'm making some progress, but that to me is part of the, what are the resources I have, and it's tools and people and, all of those things, and how difficult to be cut off, with communication and be stuck going like it's not safe to go out of the house, it's not comfy in the house, like all of those things. And gratefully, for it's temporary. The length of temporary, is different. Like you were without power for a week, your house is apparently still standing, your town is not gone, so the rebuilding or not rebuilding, and for relationships, if nothing else, betrayed partners, rebuild your life, regardless of what your addict is doing or not doing. This is like, we can't stress enough, like healthy boundaries for you are not control or punishment. They're how do I take care of myself, regardless of, of what the addict is doing or not doing. But one more thing, there was, should I trust? And we talk, Angela was part of the Empowered Women's Retreat, and we talk about learning to be trusting within ourselves, like, and identifying the right people, but regaining the opportunity to understand that our intuition is there, like it's been muffled, pushed down, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. And so shutting out some of the noises, being able to look at things and see what the next right thing, could be, can be helpful too. So, and no one, I'm with you, no one gets through life, without stuff. I really, I think lots of times people go, well, if the addict just quits the acting out, then gumdrops and lollipops. No, you still have life. And if those are maladaptive coping mechanisms that they are being used to, because I don't know how to do life, guess what? Now all of a sudden life is coming in and I'm trying not to use my problematic behaviors. So it's actually more difficult initially until we learn that we have tools and how to use them and have people in support. And that's true for partners too. Like, no one has to be alone. It can feel like you're alone, but I hear varying degrees of horrible, tragic stories. And I hear lots of stories of people who have not only survived, this is more than surviving, this is learning to thrive and flourish, despite, the negative things that happen. So, so we are here, with all of this, sharing resources, but there's also tools to use, to build hope, through whatever it is that you are personally currently going through, and that we want to be resources to help. So
Yes, exactly. So that's exactly so well said, Tammy, because that's what I want to make sure that I'm leaving us with, because this is a heavy conversation, right? The things that we're talking about, our hearts are hurting. We don't know where to go from here. We don't know what the future holds for us. The disorientation of having no guarantees in life and knowing that this isn't the only crisis that we're going to go through and that there will be more, right? All of this, there's a reason why Tammy, people like Tammy and myself and others who generously give, so that there is things like these free webinars, podcasts, articles, We Tonglen. I mean, so many things that it has to be put out there, so that everybody has access to resources and help. And that what you need, you're going to be able to find. It is out there. What you need is out there. Okay. So let's talk about the rebuilding, the resources, the things that we can do. And one of the things that, Tammy, that you said touches in a big way on this this process of picking up pieces and asking, where do I go from here? And one of the things that I have learned in this or have been reminded of, because this was a difficult lesson that I've learned earlier in life. We all need structure and routine. So even if we can't stick to the normal routine that we were sticking to before, we establish a new routine so that when the realization of everything that's happening, all of the loss, all of the impacts hits us, we know that in 1 hour, we got to pick the kids up from school. Or in 30 minutes, I'm going to take the dog for a walk, right? Having that structure and that routine keeps us connected to the rest of the world. It helps us realize that the experience that we're having is not the experience, the entire experience of life. An example that I use with betrayed partners is you can be inside your home and feeling dark and empty and lonely. And when you step outside, you see that there is blue skies. It might be cloudy, but you can see bits of blue skies peeking through, right? So we can feel like what we're experiencing is the entirety of life for us and that we're always going to feel this way. But until we step outside and give ourselves experiences, in the therapy world, we call them corrective experiences, emotionally corrective experiences. When we go out, we give ourselves experiences of goodness, of kindness, of interacting with somebody who is trustworthy, right? Taking in breaths of fresh air, filling the space, speaking your truth, right? Finding places where you can do it, giving yourself, being very intentional and giving yourself those experiences. It doesn't just happen. You have to make it happen for yourself. And nobody is responsible for that except you. We are all responsible for our own healing, regardless of what's going on around us. And it's okay because what we need to heal is there. Okay? We just have to engage the things. The next point on that is the one step at a time, one day at a time. You do not have to figure out everything today. You do not have to decide what's going to happen 5 years from now. You are still picking up the pieces, right? If I were to be surprised when I'm talking to somebody who's half of their home just floated down a river and I'm saying, well, are you going to rebuild here? What do you, like that you can't even think about that yet. You have to take things one day at a time and only ask yourself, what is the next right step for me to take in the next 5 minutes? What is required of me in the next 5 minutes, right? One day at a time. It's absolutely critical for navigating this and keeping any amount of sanity. Okay. Neighbors helping neighbors. Like I described, I could get in my vehicle and take this 5-gallon can and drive around and find the gasoline that somebody in my neighborhood needed to run their generator, right? So that they could power their oxygen machine that night. She couldn't. She was elderly and she was terrified of getting out on the streets because people are in chaos, right? It would not have been safe for her to get out and do that, but I could. And that's just one small story. Just the incredible outpouring and every day, moment by moment, you just seeing more and more stories on social media and in the news of people dropping everything. Chefs, right? Their restaurant is closed down. They can't work. They've lost everything, but they can't just sit around. So they're going in, they're cooking at a soup kitchen, right? The sense of neighbors helping neighbors, the community pulling together and helping each other, even in the midst of our loss, that is so important among betrayed partners. So when you come to one of the Empowered Women retreats, when you sign up and do the work groups with me, the betrayed partner work groups, you are going to be meeting other betrayed partners who knows where to find resources that you haven't found yet. And they're going to share that with you. And you can tell them where you're finding resources. You can sit with each other and hear each other's stories without judgment, because everybody in that space knows, hey, you know what? One moment I want to stay and I want to rebuild and I never want to leave this piece of property because it's been in my family forever. And the next moment you can't imagine ever setting foot on that property ever again. And it's totally to be expected, and there is no judgment. Nobody's going to be telling you, hey, figure out what you want and move on. No, it takes time to figure this out. So neighbors helping neighbors, communities pulling together, being understood by others who are experiencing some of the same losses that you're experiencing. This resource. There is a 24/7 radio station that's playing. You can access it now because they're still talking. It's called iHeartRadio Asheville. And you can pull that up and you can listen, and around the clock, 24/7, they are sharing, okay, at this location, they have these donations. At this location, you can get tetanus and rabies shots. At this location, so-and-so is looking for so-and-so, and this is the area that they lived in. If any of you listening right now has been in that area and you know that that person is safe, please call in and let us know. This 24/7 access to shared communication where everybody is calling in and saying, it makes me think of all of the things that Seeking Integrity is offering, We Tongue Len is offering. There's always somebody there. You can tap into that and find the resources that you need and get stories of hope. You'll hear stories of loss too. There are those stories. But there's also these stories of wonderful good that's happening. One of my favorite organizations, just observing the different organizations who have been stepping up in Asheville, it's called Be Loved, and it's all one word, Be Loved Asheville. And they have been sharing on their social media amazing stories and pictures of people wearing a backpack and going out into remote areas, organizing, making sure that babies are getting diapers, right? All of these things. Check out that organization. It's amazing. Then let's see. So growing up in Florida, when we knew that there was a hurricane coming, we would have what was called a hurricane party. And what we would do is we would help each other board each other's homes up, and we would pick one house, one that didn't have a lot of trees around it and it's not too close to the water, somewhere we could all go and be there together, and we would all bring snacks. It's like a big tailgate party. We would bring games, we would bring flashlights, we would make sure that our kids had other kids to play with, all of the things. And we knew that we couldn't stop the hurricane. We couldn't change the direction or the path that the hurricane was going to take. We had no way of stopping the impact that that hurricane was going to have on us. But while that hurricane was happening, we were together. We were eating together. We were comforting each other when somebody was scared, right? There's usually one wisecrack in the group who could always make everybody laugh. I encourage you to have hurricane parties with each other when you're going through this. You cannot control this storm, okay? But you can take steps to protect yourself, creating boundaries, closing things that need to be closed down, not trying to work while you don't have electricity, right? Don't do those things. Take everything off of your shoulders that you can take until the storm passes. Only do what you need to do. Gather with others and don't do it alone. Okay.
So we've got questions too. So I want to make sure you've got time. I know you. I want to make sure you've got time.
So much. Okay. How about if I'm going to end with a quote, but why don't
Okay.
I take a couple of questions and then to
Okay.
finish this up, I'll end with a quote. How about that?
Perfect. Okay. So the resonates with what you talked about, losing the ability to do things. Sometimes in the midst of the beginning of the storms, once I'm set, I want to help others, but find myself shutting down. It's after the storm that I feel I need to get out and help, especially if it has had no impacts. My as Milton heads towards my coast, I'm east of Fort Myers. I'm planning on helping all those who need it if we are fine. And she adds, I am seeing the storms of life are like the storms of betrayal. Thank you for doing this webinar and praying for those affected. So that's one series. Do you have any comment on
I
the first one?
do. I
Please.
do.
Yeah.
I have a very important comment on that. We can run ourselves into the ground trying to help somebody else, or trying to even help ourselves in ways that it's just not the right way to help ourselves in that moment, right? If I need rest, if I just need to cuddle up on a sofa with my child, that's not the time to go out looking for gasoline, right? But that doesn't mean that 2 hours from now or the next day, I'm not going to get out there and look for the gasoline. So it's not an all or nothing. When we are doing this, we are truly taking it 5 minutes at a time, 1 hour at a time, one day at a time. What is it that I need right now so that tomorrow I can lace up my boots and put my boots out on the ground, right? I think that's an excellent comment. Thank you. Whoever posted, thank you. And
Yeah. Well,
and
I think
yeah.
it's being intentional, being aware, and I think with partners, it's so easy to put caretaking for everyone else. But we often say, it's like the flight attendants say, put your oxygen mask on first. You can't help somebody else if you're unconscious on the plane. So it is really imperative that you understand, and Angela just used, I may need to comfort my child snuggle up on the couch with my child. Your child may need comforting. It's okay. It can even be your inner child. There's just a hint too. It can be okay to just snuggle with your inner child and go like, I need to take care of me right now. And you'll know, you will know when the time is right to lace up your boots and be out. Right?
Yes. Yes. Well said, Tammy. Excellent. Well said. Good. Do you want
Okay.
to, I know we're
The
almost
next
out of time. Do you
question.
want to do more questions?
Yeah, and I don't have a hard stop. So if you have a
Okay.
couple more minutes, we'll do. Okay. Angela, will you repeat the final question or statement that you said to ask instead of when is it safe to rebuild and should I rebuild here or somewhere else? Is it safe to rebuild as a betrayed partner? Do I need to wait until I heal to work on rebuilding the relationship? I'm afraid it will be a while before I feel safe, but I'm conflicted as there are or something that I want to days that I want to rebuild, and there are days when I want to throw in the towel. Ambivalent love. I mean, I hear that all over the place. Should I stay or should I go? I hear all of that. So thoughts?
Yes. Yes. What I say to everybody who comes to the work groups that I run, any clients who come and works with me in my office, at intensives, whatever, when they ask the question, should I stay or should I go? You're asking the wrong question. The better question is, if I stay, how do I stay with integrity? And if I go, how do I go with integrity? What does that look like for me? That is a guiding compass that will help you make your daily decisions. Today, do I need to leave? Today, do I want to stay? What is my integrity? What does that look like for me? And if I'm feeling like it's time to go, what do I need to do in order to leave with integrity? What would that look like? Right? Those are the better questions. So if somebody decides that they want to stay in their home on this mountain that has been washed away, how can they do that with integrity? How can they do that in such a way that honors themselves and their ancestors? Right? Or if they leave, how can they do that in such a way that honors themselves and their ancestors? Yeah, that's a great one.
Okay. So those are the questions. So,
Okay. So I'm gonna wrap this up with a quote that I saw on social media by Be Loved Asheville. They posted this fairly recently. They said, quote, "We are the ones we've been waiting for.
mhm.
In this quiet moment, we realize there's no one left to wait for. We are the solution. Together, we transform that longing into action, embracing the power of what we can do when we believe in love and unity. The strength lies in our hands, our hearts, and our shared purpose." And for that, I feel deeply grateful for. So thank you all so much for coming here today. I'm so glad we did this.
Well, thank you, Angela. And I posted, on Seeking Integrity is this video will be posted hopefully yet today. But I want to remind everyone that the Betrayed Partner Part 1 starts tomorrow. There are spots left in that work group. I would encourage you to join that if you are a betrayed partner. It's good. I have people, and I'm just going to quick address this. We have people that go like, "Oh, well, I've been doing this for a while, so should I go?" And I'm like, yes, because like there's you will learn more. If I'm brand new to this, should I go? Yes, because you will get some foundational components. So there's always more to learn, and you'll get perspective, and you'll get part of a tribe that you can lean into, if you choose to. Everybody gets to pick, but but it's good information that will help on this journey. This is the storm you didn't ask for that came. So Angela and others are here to help you, as you navigate the cleanup, right?
Exactly, exactly. And it's just more fun when you're there. It's just
Yes.
so much better when you're there with us. I enjoy it. I love getting to meet all of you. And recently I reached out to people who completed the part 2. So there's part 1 and part 2. Recently I reached out to everybody who had graduated from part 2 and just said, hey, just touching base. Did anybody need anything? Where are you guys? What kind of resources do you need? Do you want me to point you to any particular articles? Do you have questions? I want to stay in touch. I care deeply for the people who do this, and I take time to respond to emails. So it truly is something where you are gaining a lifelong resource by engaging these work groups, and we make it very affordable. We do everything we can to keep costs down. So because we want you there. So
We do. Thank you, Angela. And as someone shared, prayers, thoughts and prayers for everyone who's in current cleanup, and also in the path of the new storm that's coming through. And this won't be the last storm. So this is good information as we proceed through life. So thanks, everyone. Bye.
bye.